Asia. We now move to the region's defining crisis, where Palestinians in Gaza City surveyed the damage after an Israeli airstrike destroyed homes. Residents say the army warned them to evacuate, and no casualties have so far been reported at the site. Thousands have fled as Israeli tanks move closer to Gaza City. Israel's Security Cabinet, chaired by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, approved a plan to seize the city, despite calls from allies to reconsider. Listen in to what some of the residents had to say.
قاعدين عادي في شغلنا، جانا تعميم انه في اقلاع للحاره كلها. جينا خلينا عيالنا واولادنا. بعد بنص ساعه قالوا ما يهتمش حد في الموجود في المنطقه كليتها. تم ضرب دار شو اسمه جياب. وزي ما انت شايف ما ضلش ولا بيت ولا دار سطح ولا دار تانك ولا ضل اي حاجه في المربع كله. قاعد تشريح غزه، هو ايش ضل في غزه اساسا؟ ما ضلش فيها غزه حاجه، لغار البحر اللي قدامنا وكمان بيت اللي ضل في هالمخيمات، ما ضلش في حاجه في غزه. انت بتحكي عن 70-80% مشتحين غزه، مسكرين معابر، مسكرين اكل شرب منفس ما حياه اطفال، حتى الاطفال كمان ما لهمش حياه اللي يعيشوها، ضلش فيها تهدد على اي اساس؟ ما انت مشتاح غزه كلها.
Meanwhile, the United Nations Agency for Palestinian Refugees, otherwise known as UNRWA, says the famine in Gaza can still be stopped. Warehouses in Jordan and Egypt hold food, medicine and hygiene supplies ready to enter Gaza. UNRWA says Israel must allow aid to prevent further deaths. The famine has been confirmed as entirely man-made by the UN-backed IPC, which warns of a sharp increase in deaths if aid is not delivered immediately. Ross, let's start with, of course, the ongoing and recently commenced operation that has gone on in Gaza City. There's been wide condemnation of the arising humanitarian crisis in the enclave, the fact that Palestinians are being forcibly displaced by leaflets dropped on combat zones, as Israel calls them. Your thoughts on the Israeli military's actions here, whether it's necessary to go into Gaza City despite some of its closest allies' calls, and also, of course, widespread condemnation from within Israel as well?
One thing that myself and other guests here on NewsX have often discussed in recent months is how sensitive is Prime Minister Netanyahu to international criticism. And most of that criticism comes from Europe, and increasingly so from countries that are generally friendly to Israel, like Germany, France, or the United Kingdom. But at least as of the moment, the criticism that's coming from Europe doesn't stop the Israeli government and Prime Minister Netanyahu from ordering the Israeli Defense Forces to pursue this assault on Gaza City and to further occupy the parts of Gaza that the Israeli military hasn't occupied up to now. So definitely there will be international criticism. There will also be domestic criticism as well. But as of the moment, Prime Minister Netanyahu doesn't feel that he needs to listen to the criticism, and he's continuing to proceed with the military campaign. Now, another aspect of this, because we're already into a multi-year war, it's going to be almost 2 years since the war started, is why hasn't Israel militarily defeated Hamas? The fact is, they haven't. And that's why Netanyahu feels he still needs to proceed with this campaign, military campaign, into Gaza City.
Ross, let's talk about this damning report that came out around 24 hours ago now. A famine confirmed by the IPC, which is a UN-backed food agency. Israel says that this report is biased. They say that it isn't true. They say that there is no famine in Gaza. Given the visuals and some of the information that comes out from these proclaimed neutral agencies. Your thoughts on how this is going to impact Israel's image across the world, and also evidence that Israel has given that some of these organizations like the United Nations are in fact biased against the state of Israel itself?
No matter what Israel says, it's clear that civilians in Gaza are suffering from food deprivation. They're simply not getting enough food to eat every day. Now, Israel will say that the reason for that is Hamas is stealing food deliveries. And there is some truth to that. Hamas is a criminal terrorist organization. They do steal food. But Israel is really struggling here because the fact is that the civilians in Gaza are not getting enough food to eat every day. And as I've said here on NewsX before, I do think the Netanyahu government is sensitive to that kind of criticism, whether it comes from European countries, non-government organizations, United Nations affiliated organizations. So Israel is trying to increase the number of trucks that enter into Gaza with food aid, but clearly it's not enough at the moment. But is that going to stop the military campaign? Absolutely not, because Prime Minister Netanyahu has already made a decision. And also, Israel's most important supporter, the United States, is not making an issue of this as well. So Israel feels confident that it's doing what it needs to do, and it doesn't need to do more. But again, I think there is a key issue here, and specifically it's with regard to Israel's relationship with Europe. And I do think that Israel is sensitive to that, and Israel does want to address the complaints that are coming from European governments